After the Game Awards announcement for Game of the Year wasn't Spider-Man 2, my Twitter and Facebook feed was filled with fans of the series feeling like this.
Why?
But did Spider-Man 2 actually deserve to get Game of the Year? Spider-Man 2 is the sequel to 2018 Spider-Man, which was an amazing game, giving the player a truly authentic Spider-Man experience. In gameplay with unique combat and traversal, the folks over at Insomniac developed a truly one-of-a-kind story, which is different from the typical Spider-Man narrative, bringing a new level of depth and character development, which does a fantastic job at illustrating the difficulties of being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man while trying to balance and maintain personal relationships and struggling to establish a career. The story also introduced and developed an origin story for Miles Morales, and his story intertwines with the introduction of a new villain called Mr. Negative. The game ended with some pretty heart-wrenching moments, but also sees Miles and Peter revealing to each other that they are Spider-Man, and together they will work to protect New York. Launched in 2020, Insomniac released Spider-Man Miles Morales, which to be honest was pretty insulting to pay full price for a game which was more like an expansion, but the purpose of the game was to showcase the graphical advancements of the PS5 system, updated vibration functions of the controller, while fleshing out the story and mindset behind Miles. So, Spider-Man 2 kicks off with Miles and Peter engaging in a phone call, where Miles is asking for advice with his college application essay, which performs a recap of the previous game and its full game price expansion of Miles Morales. The opening menu opens up with Harry Osborn, Norman Osborn, and Dr. Connors having a conversation in front of a tank with a suspicious-looking black tentacle-like entity floating around. One guess who that is. We learned from the first game that Harry was away in Europe, but the truth is he actually has a disease which will eventually kill him. And if we know anything about Norman Osborn, we know money and resources are no object, and as a father, will stop at nothing to save his son. Peter looks to have a new job as a teacher, and as fate would have it, he is teaching at the same school Miles attends as a physics teacher, only to see that it looks like Sandman is wreaking havoc in New York City. So Peter and Miles burst into action to save the city, and from a player experience, you're right back into the thick of the action. And for returning players to the series, the controls are all too familiar, with swinging, ziplining, and dodging controls being identical to that of the first game, allowing you to resume your mantle as New York's wall-crawling superhero. The epic fight sequence against the Sandman acts as no more than a tutorial to get you as the player re-familiarized with the controls of traversal and combat, and it's no secret that Insomniac games have created some beautiful, seamless transitions from cinematic to gameplay sequences. All the while, the quick remarks and comments of Spider-Man taking place as you play. Speaking of seamless transitions, through this section of the tutorial, you'll switch between Peter and Miles and their different abilities available to them as Spider-Man. Miles, as we know, has the ability to create weaponized bioelectricity, which has been called his Venom powers, which has no relation to the symbiotic character of Venom. In addition to this, Miles also has the ability to turn himself invisible, which comes in handy on those stealthy missions where it's better to remain unseen. Peter, on the other hand, is our traditional Spider-Man and isn't packing those added levels of power, so the team at Insomniac have taken inspiration from the NCU and the Iron Spider suit, giving Peter added levels of technology to keep him in line with Miles. Now, some additions which Spider-Man 2 offers over its predecessor is that it has upgraded the size of the map. It's identical from the first game, you just have access to more of the surrounding areas to Manhattan Island. As such, traversal from the first game has been improved with the introduction of the web wings, which allows the Spider-Men to harness air tunnels as they move around the city and upward drafts of air which are made from buildings, allowing you to glide through the air at speed. As you take down the Sandman, we are introduced to the jungle where Kraven the Hunter has killed a man in search of an equal, at which point one of his henchmen alert him to the fact that New York is crawling with opportunities for Kraven to find his match. This is how you know you're at the end of the tutorial level. Combat controls have been altered from the first game in terms of button configuration. Holding L1 plus X, square, circle or triangle will perform a high damage move. If you're Peter, this will engage his mechanical spider legs which will spring from his back, and if you're Miles, this will give you the use of his venom powers. If you hold R1 plus X, circle, square or triangle, this will give you use to the gadget abilities to use in combat scenarios. Now, this is only my opinion, but the gadget abilities and how they are used I don't find to be the best addition to the game. To me, it actually removes the flexibility from the first game of having the use of all the gadgets at once. In the original game, I would hold down L1 and time would slow down and open up a wheel, and I could select from a host of gadgets on the fly, whereas in this game, I'm limited to the 4 gadgets I have mapped into the R1 function buttons, meaning, if I want to alter any of this at any point, I need to do this from the pause menu, and it just felt like a step backwards to me. Like the first, Spider-Man 2 is loaded with so many side missions and quests, and side stories to explore around New York, and just like the previous game, the city is divided into areas so that you, as the player, can keep track of what you have achieved in that area so far. You also have the ability to change which Spider-Man you want to be. You can choose to play as Peter or Miles when free roaming around. However, some story missions and side missions can only be achieved through using a particular Spider-Man, so you can't just be the Spider-Man you gravitate to the most. As you do random criminal encounters, you'll occasionally run into the other Spider-Man engaging in the same event, at which point, once this is complete, you'll get a wholesome little encounter before you swing off into the beautiful cityscape. And don't get me wrong, the cityscape is beautiful, but again, it's an expanded area from the first game and it's basically the same graphics from Miles Morales, so if you're already well versed in 2018 Spider-Man and 2020 Spider-Man Miles Morales, there isn't that much new going on here outside of the new areas of the map. But again, this makes sense as Spider-Man's adventures predominantly take place in New York. Standard hand-to-hand combat in the game is basically identical to that of 2018's game, with square being your primary attack button, circle being your dodge, X being your button to jump, and triangle to control your zipline abilities. You are still required to build up focus in combat in order to heal yourself, or you can spend the focus to unleash an instant knockout move, which have some of the best mini cinematics I have seen since God of War. This wouldn't be a true successor to Spider-Man if it didn't have scientific-based minigames, and I'm happy to say these are still in the game, because as we know, as cool and as witty as Spider-Man is, they are also highly intelligent and have a thirst for knowledge, and outside all of the ass-kicking I was unleashing upon the undesirables of New York City, this offered a great change of pace. As the story continues throughout the game, Peter is now living in Aunt May's house and he is trying to convince MJ to move in with him. MJ is now working for J. Jonah Jameson and is rocking a motorbike. Out of nowhere, the return of Harry Osborn, Peter Parker's childhood best friend, and the two of you take a trip down memory lane by riding bikes down to your old high school. Now, I have to point out here, with the work that PlayStation did on the controller vibration feedback based on different surfaces is phenomenal, while immersing you a little bit deeper into the game. When riding over a cobblestone street, you can feel the bumps translate through the controller into your hands. You'll go through some flashback sequences playing as Peter when Harry and Peter broke into the high school back in the day, and when Peter was first coming into Spider-Man, and Harry drops the bombshell that he is kicking off a company that as young adults, they both dreamed of making. Much like the first game, the sequel takes our Spider-Man through many confronting scenarios involving some heavy-hitting villains, which ultimately lead to hard decision-making and character growth events, which is really what makes all of Insomniac's Spider-Man games such an astonishing experience to play. For instance, because Kraven the Hunter is in New York, he has let loose some of the supervillains who were in prison, and Miles is faced with the release of the villain who killed his father, Mr. Negative. Peter reveals his true identity to Harry Osborn because Harry has let slip that he is now sporting his own set of superpowers thanks to a mysterious black substance which is coming out of his body. Without saying it, we know someone else's presence is going to be known throughout the game, and for anyone who is keen on playing the game and hasn't yet, I have no intentions of ruining this for you. From the menus, you do have the ability to change what both Spider-Man wear in terms of their suits, and can even go a step further with alternate color schemes for most of the suits, which allows you to give either Miles or Peter their own unique look based on what your tastes are. The skill point upgrade tree is broken into 3 sections: Miles, Peter, and both Spider-Man, which allows you to focus on upgrading the abilities which affect both Spider-Man at the same time, or you can upgrade respective to the abilities dedicated to Peter or Miles. Upgrading the health, traversal, focus, and damage affect both Spider-Man collectively, so there is no need for concern here. These are upgraded through completing side activities and events in the game which reward you with tokens to perform the upgrades, which is designed to keep the player engaged and hunting down the respective side missions and activities so you can max out your characters. Now, let's take a moment to reflect on all this and break it down. What we have is a slightly enhanced map from the 2 previous games. Not all changes to the combat UI are positive, in my opinion anyway. Same basic combat controls, minimal changes in how you traverse through the city, the ability to play as both Spider-Man and change them at will, and one of the best Spider-Man stories to ever exist in playthrough. Again, that's my opinion. Now to me, this isn't enough to make Game of the Year, and that's okay, because it doesn't need to be Game of the Year. Spider-Man is a spectacular experience all on its own, and it doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. New and returning players alike are treated with such an emotional adventure in the story, while witnessing some of the most badass fights ever to grace our screens, and we get to be a part of this. Spider-Man allows you to take on the mantle of the famous wall crawlers and pick up and live through their emotional stresses while they traverse through events which make them who they are, and that is exactly what Insomniac Games is delivering. In fact, I think the folks that run the MCU need to take a good hard look at this game and then themselves, because no movie has ever delivered the mixed and complex layers of stories and emotions that these games provoke. And when I'm old and look back on this game, I'll have nothing but the fondest memories.
Are you sure it's a big city? I can handle it.
I should have guessed you'd come here. Sorry we lost track of each other.
It was my fault for wandering off, but Spider-Man took good care of me.